The second tutor, Master Halbrand, Obedience and Equations. Master Halbrand arrived 3 days after Lady Voss fled the palace. He was tall, pinched-faced, and so thin that he resembled a quill made flesh. All sharp angles, stiff posture, and ink-stained fingers. He greeted Seraphine with no bow, no courtesy, and not a hint of interest. "I do not care for politics," he said by way of introduction. "I do not indulge arrogance, and I do not suffer prodigies who believe talent outweighs discipline." Seraphine blinked once. "Good," she said. "I don't either." It was the last time they agreed on anything. Halbrand's curriculum was not about fire as Seraphine understood it. He taught arcanodynamics, the mathematics of magic, energy exchange, ley elasticity, volatile resonance, structural collapse tolerances. While Seraphine viewed flame as alive, Halbrand reduced it to diagrams and decimal points. To produce stable ignition, he droned, chalk tapping the slate, one must consider mana density, elemental composition, and ambient astral pressure. Repeat. Seraphine stared at the diagram. "That's not how it behaves." Halbrand froze mid-tap. "How what behaves?" "Fire." Halbrand let out a breath through his nose. A small, weary sigh. "Fire is not a creature, acolyte. It does not behave. It responds to input." Seraphine considered that, then replied, "Tell that to a burning city." Halbrand paused long enough to realize she wasn't joking. "Your assignment," he snapped, "is to solve the formula on the board. No improvisation, no theatrics." Seraphine solved it in less than 60 seconds, because Halbrand assumed she couldn't. Lesson 3. Controlled Resonance. By the third week, Halbrand had made it his mission to break her habit of intuitive casting, the very thing that made her dangerous and exceptional. He set an iron brazier between them and lit a small flame within. "Control the temperature precisely," he instructed. "We are testing resonance stability, not spectacle." Seraphine raised her hand over the brazier. The flame rose, lowered, flickered, calmed. But Halbrand wasn't satisfied. "No, you are shaping without calculation," he scolded. "You must quantify the energy, predict the result. Magic without equations is guesswork. Guesswork is how mages die." Seraphine's jaw tightened. "And equations are how wars are lost while men like you debate variables." Halbrand's nostrils flared. "War is not your concern, acolyte." Seraphine turned toward him fully, the flame behind her bowing instinctively in her direction. Halbrand's first undeniable glimpse of her affinity. "My entire life is war," she said quietly. Halbrand said nothing for the rest of the session. Lesson 5. Sparks and Steel. On the 5th lesson that week, Halbrand introduced volatile sparks, small nuggets of compressed magical energy used for battlefield ignition. Most students handled them with tongs. Seraphine picked one up with her bare fingers. Halbrand nearly choked. "Are you insane? Those can ignite at contact." Seraphine examined the spark with clinical curiosity. "It won't. You cannot know that." She looked him dead in the eyes. "It's not afraid of me." Halbrand muttered something about reckless acolytes and natural selection, but he never forgot that moment. The South Lecture Hall off the Royal Library was not meant to inspire awe. It was a practical room. Stone walls, high narrow windows, rows of benches worn smooth by years of restless students. At this hour, it was usually empty. Halbrand liked it that way. He could arrive early, arrange his notes, and fortify himself with silence before Seraphine arrived to undo it. This morning, the door was already unlatched. He frowned, pushed it open, and stopped in the threshold. Seraphine sat cross-legged on the long demonstration table, her back to one of the tall windows. Dawn light edged her hair in pale gold. Her right hand was upturned. In her palm, a flame no larger than a coin flickered. Halbrand almost called out to smother it. Then the flame stood. It stretched, thin as a thread, and then thicker, taking the shape of a tiny figure with arms and legs. For an instant it wobbled. Then, as Seraphine turned her wrist, the little figure bowed. She smiled faintly. "Left foot," she murmured. The flame person stepped. "Right," it followed. She said nothing grand, no incantation or name of power, just quiet directives, like a girl instructing a child in its first dance. The flame obeyed, spinning in a clumsy circle, trailing sparks that faded before they touched her skin. Halbrin's heart beat very loudly in his ears. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him, without meaning to. The sound made the flame stumble. Seraphine didn't startle. She glanced over her shoulder, eyes bright. "You're early," she said. Halbrin moved closer, unable to stop himself. "So are you," he managed. "What in all the Elder Theorems are you doing?" She looked back to her palm. "Waiting for you." "That," he said, pointing, "is not waiting. That is unscripted elemental articulation. How are you maintaining form without a circle?" Seraphine tilted her hand. The flame person balanced, then dipped into a neat bow toward Halbrin. "I asked it not to fall," she said. Halbrin stared. "That is not an explanation." "It works," she replied. The little figure began to dance again, more sure now. Tiny arms raised, legs kicking embers in tiny arcs. For a heartbeat it had shoulders, hips, the suggestion of a face. Halbrin felt the fine hairs on his arms lift. "Miss Seraphine," he said carefully, "flame does not do that. It does not look at people. It does not respond to suggestion. It follows gradients of heat and fuel. That is all." The flame person turned as if noticing him for the first time and seemed to lean in his direction. Seraphine's mouth twitched. "It's curious," she said. "You don't usually come in quietly." Halbrin swallowed. "This is not amusing," he said, though his voice had softened into a kind of strained awe. "You are performing invocation without a focus. Do you understand what could happen if—" The tiny figure lengthened suddenly, its cloak of sparks flaring into a thin, rippling mantle. The light in the room shifted. Shadows on the walls drew back, as though trying to avoid its touch. The air vibrated, not with heat exactly, but with attention. For a moment, Halbrin had the absurd, chilling impression that he was in the presence not of a trick, not of a spell, but of something that remembered what it was to burn before there were words for burning. He heard himself whisper, "That is not arcanodynamics. That is something older." Seraphine watched the flame with the same calm interest she might give an insect on a windowsill. "I didn't call anything," she said quietly. "I just listened. It wanted to move. I let it." Halbrin forced himself to breathe. "Fire does not want," he said. "It reacts. We are the ones who want. We are the ones who direct. That distinction is the foundation of every—" The flame person turned its tiny, featureless head toward Seraphine, as if in recognition. Then as she curled her fingers slowly into a fist, it bowed once more and collapsed inward without smoke, without scorch. Her palm was bare. Halbrin waited for the smell of char. There was none. The stone tabletop bore no mark. Seraphine hopped down from the table. "So," she said, "what's today's lesson?" Halbrin set his satchel down very, very carefully. "Today's lesson," he said, "is cancelled." Her brows rose. "Did I pass?" "This is not a jest," he snapped, then caught himself, the words sounding too much like Lady Voss for his liking. He pinched the bridge of his nose. "You are working in directions no arcanist should." "Should?" Seraphine repeated. "But can?" He looked up sharply. "You do not know where that road ends," he said. "No," she agreed. "Do you?" Halbrin opened his mouth, closed it. "No," he admitted. For a moment, the only sound was the distant murmur of the library beyond the door. "You are to leave that particular trick alone," he said finally, "until I understand it." "You don't," she said. His jaw tightened. "Until I do," he corrected. Seraphine considered him for a heartbeat, then nodded once. "All right," she said. "I won't do it in front of you again." It was not the reassurance he had wanted, but it was the only one he was going to get. What finally shattered their working relationship was not flame, nor failed lessons, but Halbrin's ego. On the 12th lesson, during rigid exercises in heat inversion theory, Seraphine interrupted mid-lecture. "Master Halbrin," she said suddenly. Halbrin didn't look up. "Not now." "Master Halbrin." His chalk snapped against the slate. What, acolyte? Seraphine tilted her head slightly, studying the brazier between them. Do you know, she said calmly, how hot a flame would need to be to bring a man's blood to boil inside his body? The room went silent. Halbrand stared at her, color draining from his face. Why would you ask such a barbaric question? Seraphine shrugged. You seem to believe I am a danger because I lack discipline. I want to know if you actually understand the dangers you lecture about. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then sputtered. Nobody knows the answer to that. Seraphine gave a faint, humorless smile. I don't either, but I knew you didn't. For a long, terrible second, Halbrand said nothing, because for the first time, he was afraid she was right. He ended the lesson early without explanation. That night, long after the torches in the hallways had guttered low, Master Halbrand sat alone at his desk. Sheets of parchment lay before him, covered in hasty equations and half-sketched sigils. He had tried to map what he had seen, the stability of the flame's joints, the pattern of its motion, the absence of visible constraint. Every line ended in the same place, unknown variable. He rubbed at his eyes, feeling his age and the ache of his shoulders. In the end, he set aside the diagrams and reached instead for a fresh sheet. His handwriting, usually meticulous, wavered slightly on the first line. To His Majesty's steward, he paused, then continued. I refuse to instruct the acolyte Seraphine Valor any further. Ink blotted at the end of the sentence. He blotted it with a cloth and kept writing. This is not due to lack of aptitude. Quite the opposite. The girl's grasp of symbolic abstraction and arcanodynamic translation is formidable. She solves equations by intuition, then reverses them into coherent proofs after the fact. I have never seen its like. He hesitated, then added, that is the problem. He stared at the words for a long moment. She does not look at fire and see a tool. She looks at it and sees a question, and it appears intent on answering. In the margin, without meaning to, he wrote the image that would not leave him, a tiny figure of light bowing on a girl's palm. I am not afraid of her, the girl, though prudence would justify it. I am afraid of what she will become if left in the hands of men who value only outcomes and never methods. His pen slowed. If she ever answers her own questions, I pray to every god we no longer mention that she is on our side when she does. He sanded the ink, folded the letter, and sealed it with his personal sigil. In the morning, it found its way to the steward's desk. By midday, Master Halbrand Thalor's rooms were empty. When Seraphine heard he was gone, she didn't smile or gloat. She simply asked, Who's next?
Master Halbrand tried to control me. He could not. Who's next? Come back next week for The Rise of the Ash Queen. Chapter 4. The Awakening of the Scholar of Fire. Part 3.